Welcome back to Fantasy Fights. This time we're going to take a look at the top 10 heavyweights of the 2000s. Many people look at this decade as the decade dominated by the Klitsko brothers, pictured here. But there were a lot of other good heavyweights that we're going to take a look at, and hopefully I can hear from you in your comments on who you think the top 10 were. At number 10, Samuel Peter of Nigeria, 38'9", 6'2", 253, 77-inch reach. Lost to Vitali Klitsko in a 12-round decision for the IBF WBO title in 2005. His two biggest victories were over James Toney, who was a tough customer. Oleg Moskov, he knocked out in the 6th round in 2006. He had a lot of trouble with the Klitsko brothers. Here he is in action, showing his power, devastating power. He lost twice to Vladimir and once to Vitali. And later in his career, he just continued to fight. And that's when he mounted up a lot of these losses. He became just a trial horse. But in his prime, he was a devastating fighter. You can see how large he is. One of the many heavyweights that came out of Nigeria. It's hard to rank these top 10 fighters because in a lot of cases, they were inactive most of the decade, or in other cases, they were not that great of fighters, but they were very active and came up with a lot of wins. So in Samuel's case, he was pretty active, and that's what got him the 10th spot. At number 9 is Rusland Chagaev from Uzbekistan, 34-3-1, 6'1", 224. He was known as the White Mike Tyson. He held the WBA belt from 2007 to 2009, and he defeated John Ruiz in a 12-round decision and Nikolai Valu in a 12-round decision to gain the WBA belt. He's a rather short heavyweight, but very devastating puncher. I think most people probably haven't heard of him because he was popular in the Eastern Bloc, and that's part of the problem that ranking the fighters in the top 10 from this decade, you've got a lot of guys that you've never heard of. And here's Valu right here, the 7-footer. And you can see Chagaev is going to be the first man, I believe, to defeat him. And you can see some of the punches. And he was a hard man to hit because he was so big. Chagaev is not that tall. But nonetheless, very devastating puncher. And he won a majority decision in this fight. Here is another fight in which Chagaev is in action. And notice his knockout power. One punch, pretty much the fight stopped. At number 8, Corrie Sanders, South Africa, 42-4, 6'4", 225. Won the WBO heavyweight championship, the lightly regarded belt, in 2003 with his knockout victory of Vladimir Klitsko in the 2nd round. And in all honesty, I really liked Corrie Sanders, but that's why he's number 8 on this list. He was not very active during the decade. He took sometimes a year off between fights, and he did lose to Vitali Klitsko in 2004, which would have been for universal recognition. This is a 2003 fight for Sanders, which basically put him on the map. He really didn't earn this opportunity. They were looking at a lot of different fighters, and Sanders was the only one that jumped at the opportunity. I believe he made $100,000 for this fight. But regardless, Sanders was a powerful puncher. He came straight ahead. He could take a blow, and there's Vladimir going on the canvas. And Vladimir at the time was considered the next great thing in boxing. You don't want to swap punches with Corrie Sanders. As I said, he could take a punch. He had lightning hands and had a lot of power. His fights did not last long. Here he is against Hasim Rahman, who later is going to knock out Lennox Lewis and obtain the heavyweight championship of the world. This is a great fight if you ever want to go on YouTube and watch it. But this is an example of Corrie Sanders' power. He didn't back down from anybody, and Rahman was a powerful puncher. He could take a punch, he could deliver. Great fight. Coming in at number 8, Corrie Sanders. At number 7, John Ruiz, WBA world champion from 2001 to 2003. Gained it again in 2005. Now, Ruiz is going to be ranked mainly for his activity in the decade. He didn't have one monumental fight. He had several, and a lot of them he lost. Unlike Sanders and Chagaev, he is going to be ranked mainly on his volume of fights. I couldn't keep him out of the top 10 because he fought so many people. And in particular, his main rival was Evander Holyfield. Early in the decade, they fought 3 times. Ruiz had a draw, a win, and a loss against the real deal Holyfield. Here he is against Andrew Gulata, a fight that he won. He went down twice in this fight, but he wins the decision. He's a tough customer, was not a fan favorite. His fights were ugly. He was not a particular devastating puncher. He just held a lot. And of course, most people remember his 30-second knockout to David Tua in the previous decade, and thought that was the fighter that was doing all this. Actually, he overcame that and became a really fine boxer, and was really well known as having a pretty good chin. Here he is in a knockout punch, and this is some of his hand speed. There's so much holding when he fights, you don't get to see it, but here's a devastating knockout that he has. John Ruiz, number 7. Coming in at number 6, Evander Holyfield. He was ranked in the 1980s, in his prime in the 1990s, and on a decline in the 2000s, and he's still ranked. At the age of 40, he was still very successful. Had a win over John Ruiz and Hasim Rahman, and fought Vladimir in 2008 and lost a very close decision for the WBA championship. Here he is in action against the 7-foot Russian. Very fast, very quick. At number 5, Hasim Rahman. Rahman's mainly ranked on here because of his 2001 victory knockout of Lennox Lewis in the 5th round. He won the WBC, IBF, and IBO titles in 2001 and was recognized as universally as the heavyweight champion of the world. He lost to Evander Holyfield, and he did have a draw against David Tua. Here he is against Lennox Lewis in his famous knockout. Some say Lewis took him lightly, whatever it was. You didn't want to take Hasim Rahman lightly. He had a lot of power, and that's why he comes in at number 5 during the decade. I feel really comfortable about that because of this victory. At number 4, the light-hitting Chris Byrd, Flint, Michigan. WBO champion in 2000, IBF champion from 2002 to 2006. Had a win over Vitali Klitsko, which was basically, Klitsko quit because of his shoulder. Big win over David Tua, Evander Holyfield. Those were 2 of his bigger wins. And here he is in action against Holyfield during the decade. Holyfield seemed to fight everybody. Byrd really won this fight really easily because of his speed and quickness. Holyfield was an aged fighter at the time, but nonetheless was considered a top contender. Chris Byrd at number 4. Ranking the top 3 fighters in the decade was very difficult. I put Vitali Klitsko at number 3 mainly because he was not that active. I put his brother ahead of him because he was a much more active fighter. And the reason Vitali was not real active was a lot of injuries that he had. He was 6'7", 245, WBC champion in 2004, regained the title in 2008 to 2012. Remember, he had the loss to Chris Byrd because of the shoulder injury. He was ahead on Lennox Lewis in points after 6 rounds, but lost the fight on cuts. Here he is gaining universal recognition as champion by Ring Magazine in his victory over Corrie Sanders. Sanders had just knocked out his brother, so this was a very important fight. Klitsko had little trouble with Sanders. The thing you need to focus on Vitali is at no time was he ever put on the canvas. And here he is against Lennox Lewis, and as I said, he was ahead on points when this fight was stopped because of cuts. The loss he did have came against Lennox Lewis and the shoulder injury against Chris Bird. So he was a very, very strong fighter. Could have been number 1 in this decade, but I put him at number 3. What do you think? Would you put him this high or low? But he's definitely in the top 3. Coming in at number 2, Vladimir Klitsko. I put Vladimir ahead of his brother because he was much more active. He won a number of belts during the decade as well. He won the Ring Magazine recognition in 2009 with his victory over Chagaev. He beat Chris Bird twice, Samuel Peter twice. He did lose 2 fights to Corrie Sanders and Lamont Brewster, but he reversed the Brewster decision later with a 5th 6-round knockout. Very active. The turning point in his career was when he turned to Emanuel Stewart and he became his trainer. I believe his first fight he lost, but after that he won a number of fights in a row. It's not going to be until 2015 that he's going to lose another fight. Here he is in action against one of the top heavyweights of the decade, Chris Bird. No competition. He wins a clear-cut decision the first time, and the second time he stops Chris Bird. Emanuel Stewart really changed his style and made him a much more effective fighter. Next, we're going to take a look at Klitsko against Hasim Rahman, the former champion that knocked out Lennox Lewis. And once again, Vladimir has no problem. He's a very cautious fighter, uses his reach to his advantage. Please hit the like button and subscribe, and let me know what you think about my top 10. At number 1, I've got Lennox Lewis. In all honesty, I cannot put either one of the Klitskos ahead of him. I thought Lennox Lewis' body of work in the 2000s, the decade, was very, very strong. And I think he still was in his prime. He defeated David Tua, Hasim Rahman, Mike Tyson, and Vitali Klitsko. And you can see all the belts that he won. I'm not going to name them all. But he was a dominant force. He retired from the ring in 2004 as the heavyweight champion of the world. One of only 4 men that ever do that. And him and Gene Tunney and Rocky Marciano are the only ones that did not return to the ring. Here he is against Mike Tyson. Tyson is not ranked in the top 10 in the decade, mainly because he didn't have any quality wins. What do you think? Thanks for watching.